Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Tiger Minor League Report podcast here at TigersMLReport.com. I am Rogelio Castillo. Alongside me is Chris Brown. And today we're going to be breaking down our December 2023 top 30 update. And the reason why we don't not doing this live today is because sometimes I think we get sidetracked with some of the questions in there. And of course, we've had some questions about already that came out when we dropped our top 30 list. And there's a couple prospect reports that we still have to drop. So, for example, I'm working on Andrew Magno, and I still have to do Chris Myers. But this week's been kind of a big week around here. We had Ryan Garko on, so please check that out if you haven't already. We had JJ Cooper, and we also had the Tigers signing Jack Flaherty. So it's been got a little bit sidetracked around here, but it's okay. But it's definitely worth it. So it was funny too, Chris. Somebody told me that we should have sat on the JJ Cooper stuff for a little while longer. It was like we got a golden goose in Ryan Garko, so I couldn't really.
I
Yeah,
mean, you know, it's we interview people and we want to get the stuff out there as soon as we do it. Really, I mean, I suppose we could space things out, or I don't know, put them all in the same feed or whatever. Whatever.
yeah,
We just, it's getting to Christmas. You don't have to listen to it all the first day. It's a podcast. You can wait and watch it later. There's not particularly timely stuff. I mean, that's what the Flaherty. That's more timely, I suppose. But yeah, you can watch the Cooper or the Garco things whenever, anytime in the off season.
yeah, and not to mention we haven't been really active on our YouTube channel in a while because it's the off
Yeah,
season. But
yeah, we're taking the Christmas break. We put the Briseño video up the other day. I could probably throw up um, some of the other younger guys we haven't I might be able to get some like Carson Rucker and Andrew Dunford and Jank Diaz and those guys. We might be able to get some footage of those, but yeah, we'll,
also
we'll
that's
we'll pick it back up soon enough.
yeah, exactly. And I'm not gonna lie. I'm actually enjoying the break, and it's been also still have four more of our top five games of the year too as well. And so there's still plenty of work to do, and we want to end the year strong. So, and like I said, if you look at it, or if you want to donate to help us for getting to spring training in 2024, the donate button's right there. And of course is on the show description link. And if you're listening to us on the podcast, same thing. So, but so the top 30, the top five. I mean, we're gonna break this down a little bit and what changed, why we went behind the changes and what have you. And after talking to JJ Cooper too, it was intriguing to hear how what goes in their top 100. And I think there's aspects of that into our top 30 in understanding the difference between future potential and current performance too. But our number one still stay the same as that Cole Keith.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was interesting. The We basically, JJ Cooper didn't say they do it like a pure pref list, like a pro team would do, where they just say, okay, would you rather have this guy or that guy? But I do think that it plays a pretty heavy role in their list. What one team would trade for the other one, and some of that is just kind of perceived value. And I think that we tend to, and the way I described it to him was I say that we're a little bit more conservative, but I think that it's more like we just base it more on what we've seen and when we've seen guys actually produce. That's why I think we're probably higher on Parker Meadows than anybody else, uh, because we've seen him up in the majors playing plus defense and displaying plus power and plus speed, right? There's still questions about his hitting ability. We don't know if it's going to last, but to me, and I think we had him right next to Max Clark. I think all four of us who did we had four people who their own personal like top 30, top 40s. You, me, Jerry, and Colin, and I think our top tens were all pretty close. Like it was basically the same 10 guys, just in slightly different orders. Um, and yeah, so I understand that outside organization might prefer to trade for Max Clark because you think there's higher upside there. But what we're doing is just saying, okay, yeah, the upside is there, but we've also seen this guy actually do it, and that's valuable to me at least. That's the way that I break it down and go, okay, this guy's already put up a one war season in the big leagues in like 40 games. It means something to me.
Yeah, and that's the way I look at it too. It's you look at the production, and you also consider too something that we haven't considered before, to be quite honest, because we haven't really had the opportunity. And that's also age. I mean, what Cole Keith's
Yeah.
doing for his age, that plays a factor too. the fact that here he is out of high school performing better than, I mean, even dare I say Riley Green, who was also a high school draft pick, and this he was drafted out of the fifth round. And keep in mind too, I'm sorry, was it fourth round or fifth round? Was it fifth round in that? Was he the
Oh,
last pick
Keith?
of that? Yeah,
Keith was fifth rounder.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there, remember he was like, I'm not going to school, and he told us like
Yeah.
he was going to hit his way up to the majors, and he's done exactly that. And so there was between him and Jackson Jobe. I mean, for me, Jackson Jobe until I saw him in Erie, I had Jackson Jobe in my head lower, like towards the tail end of the top 10. Then I saw him in Erie and I was like, yeah, well, he could challenge Cole Keith for the crown. And it's really honestly flip or flop. It doesn't matter to me, at least, because you can flip or flop Cole Keith because Jobe was that good.
Yeah, and that's I think, that's for me, it was just a matter of I do think Job has the higher ceiling. I think Clark probably has a higher ceiling than Colt Keith too, because there's potential to be, plus on defense too, and we're with Keith, we're kinda hoping that he's gonna be average at second base, right? But, yeah, I think Jackson Jobe could end up being that number 1, number 2 starter, 5, 6 WAR pitcher in his prime, whereas Keith maybe tops out as like a 4 WAR guy, which is still great. But to me, it's just pitching, right? Pitchers, we've seen it over and over and over and over again. Tarek Skubal has number 1 starter upside. We haven't seen it because he's a pitcher. He keeps like we've seen the potential, but we haven't seen a full season because pitchers just get hurt. I mean, Job started the year last year, and you know he may end up being an incredible workhorse, but it's just I just naturally want to elevate hitters above pitchers because they feel slightly safer to me, which maybe we shouldn't do given Colt Keith actually has kind of an injury history too. I don't know. I just believe in his bat so much that I feel like his floor is really high.
I mean, this is a guy. There was a game. I mean, he hit for the cycle this year, and that's one of the games we're going to put on our top games of the top game minor league games of the year. And the fact that he adjusted to Toledo and just raked the last month and a half of the season, that solidified it for me. And it just
Mhm.
continues to the thing about you were right about hitters, Chris. It is pitchers can also, I mean, injuries and what have you and also maybe perhaps not even that, but like loss of velocity, which is the case with Jack Flaherty apparently, or the numbers say that. So it's also like there's a lot of things that factor in the pitchers too. They can learn a new pitch. Case in point, why Sir Gibson Long went. I think he had one of the big. I think he had the biggest jump, didn't he, from on our
Yeah.
list?
He wasn't on our list first part of last year. He made it on in the 20s, maybe like
I think it was 18 or
1918.
19. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but then he continued to pitch well. We saw that dominant, crazy start in Toledo, and then he came right up to the majors and had 4 good starts. And again, you don't want to overreact to that, but when you stack him up against the rest of the pitchers, you go, okay, well, um, this looks pretty good. like, yeah, I don't know if there's anything more than like a number 4 starter there overall, but the way he can mix his pitches and the way he's developed, um, I think gives me a lot of confidence that he can be a contributor in the big leagues. And you know what? Like just based on, and this is, shouldn't be here or there, but based on kind of the way that he's been popping up on Tiger's social media, like they have him on Instagram, they have Twitter posts about him. Like it feels like they think he's a piece of the future too.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Red Wings. He was featured on a Red Wings post the other night on Twitter, and he was out in the community. And this is something he's very is like pretty community oriented. And I got to his mother sent me a really nice note for all the coverage this year for him, and so that was great. And they were talking about how they're going together as a family trip out to, I think it was Italy, I believe it was. And so
Nice.
and they had to delay a little bit because they didn't expect the Sawyer to be in Detroit, and so
Yeah.
they had to change everything. And but he's a guy who always has been giving back, and when we got a chance to talk to him, and he was very generous with his time. And but learning that just he had the same him, Brent Hurdler, Montero, all have one thing in common, which is they learned a new pitch. And lastly, in terms of your pitching development, what are some of the? Have you done anything to tweak your pitches, your slider, anything else to Tiger fans should know about?
Yeah, so I hit like a little skid with my slider after the first half and was just not locating it as well. So I made a few tweaks with that. And then my changeup last year, I wasn't throwing it that much. This year, I've been throwing it a lot more, and it's been really effective. So that's been like a big development for me, too.
Yeah, it feels like the organization as a whole has been working on a changeup. I mean, we saw that with Sawyer Gibson Long, and we've seen that with Reese Olson as well. Is that something that you kind of set yourself aside, or the Tigers kind of set aside?
Yeah, the Tigers are big on it, having that like third pitch. They love the changeup and just thinking like it's another pitch to throw to them and keep them off balance. And yeah, they think it's really important for the big leagues, which I agree. You got to throw 3 pitches for strikes at least. So yeah, it's been a big organizational thing.
All right, it's cool. The Tigers went back to him and said, "Hey, learn this pitch, see what it does for you." And as a result, all 3 benefited from it. And what the biggest takeaway too, because Montero is number 8 on our list. Montero, you were Ryan Garco saying, simply just putting the instructions in Spanish. Something as simple as
Yeah.
that, Chris. And somebody that, I mean, coming from a bilingual family, trust me, when if you spoke to my parents in Spanish, there's immediate comfortability. They immediately let their guard down and felt more comfortable. And as silly as that sounds, but when you can speak the language, not necessarily speak the language, but also understand, it goes a long way.
Yeah, well, and that's yeah, I mean, that was, kinda led me into just talking about how we feel like the Tigers have really greatly improved their development. But it's and Garco kept saying, the credit, he was giving credit to some of the other coaches, but saying it's, all the players are doing this, and that's true. The players have to be willing and able to do it, but when they have the resources where they didn't before, that's how that happens, right? Like, it like you said, it seems really simple. I would have thought that they had translations for all this stuff, and maybe they did before, but they just weren't very good. Um, but yeah, to meet players where they are, to bring it and make it useful to them is a huge step in the right direction. And again, it seems logical. It seems logical to have good food for minor leaguers, good sleeping arrangements, all that stuff. But for so long, the minors were just kind of treated as like, a war of attrition. Like if you can make it through the minors, then you've got what it takes to play in the big leagues. And instead of giving these guys what they need to potentially make it through, and that's the big change we've seen in the system. And yeah, you talked about it. We've seen that the pitchers adding new pitches, uh, developing the way that their pitches go together, and we've seen a number of hitters make adjustments. The one that he kept coming back to was Justice Bigby, who is just outside our top 10. Did he land 10th on our list?
He landed
Uh,
number 10 or 11, just a number 11.
yeah. And that was a cool story where he said it was basically Kenny Graham was absolutely convinced that they could make this work because of the underlying data, the analytics, where he was hitting the ball hard and making great swing decisions, but it just wasn't, it was on the ground and it wasn't where they needed it to be, and so they brought that to him and they got him to adjust a little bit, and he had a huge breakout season, and that's just that's good development, that's good coaching, and it's good adjustments on the players' side. So I don't know if we're getting off track here. I don't know if we want to go like player
No,
by
no,
player. We're just kind of
no. We're explaining a little
discussing
bit.
these.
We're making a little bit of the sausage. We can go play by player here in a second. But when I did the interview with Montero, I made sure that I put the English version and Spanish version, thanks to Carlos Guillen, the Tigers bilingual coordinator, and and also making sure that I got the right dialect, because people forget that there's a difference between, like, Spanish is all the same. No, it's not. There's so many different. It's subtle. It's like you're in England, for example. If you're, I think, yeah. There's, like, for example, everybody speaks English, but then each part of the country, like Liverpool, has its own dialect twang to it, where it's a thicker accent, and so
I-
same thing with, like, Spanish. There's different types of subtle, like, what slang is in what you would refer to as commonly Mexican Spanish is primarily what you hear here, but in Venezuela or Cuba, or for anything for that matter, there's certain slang that's totally different based off region.
I mean, imagine people in Scotland speak English, people in Australia and New Zealand speak English, people in Mississippi, in West Virginia, and California speak English. None of it sounds the same,
Yeah.
right? And there's different in parts of Canada. It's all different around there. So yeah, I mean that helps. Um, I mean we would. generally understand, but it might take a little work. And so, yeah, like I said, meeting the player where they are and trying to help them understand paid huge dividends for Montero. I mean, like you said, he climbed from West Michigan up to Toledo and ended up leading the league or leading the organization in innings pitched and strikeouts. And, um, the ERA did not end up looking outstanding in Toledo. But he went out there and pitched 5 innings, and I think in every outing, and strikeouts were still there. He was just giving up a few too many hits, and that's going to come down to, I think, just tightening up the command a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, there's a big league pitcher there. It's just a matter of, is he going to be back end starter? Is he going to be high leverage reliever? And that's probably what we'll find out over the course of the next season.
Definitely. And there is going to be we'll talk about another potential reliever on our list too. But we'll since we kind of went over 1 and 2, Max Clark coming in number 3, Baseball America had him at number 1. That was, again, I didn't see enough Max Clark. I saw what Lakeland. There was not much in video of him in Lakeland. I saw enough in Perfect Game, and I saw him in situations like that. I understood why the Tigers drafted him based off the potential. So at the same time, Max Clark could be number 1 at this point next year.
Yeah. If he goes, he might have a monster spring, right? And end up at starting the year in West Michigan. I doubt it based on the way that they've operated. But yeah, I mean, JJ Cooper put it really well too, is that whereas we know who Max Clark is, but we haven't been out, we're not at Perfect Game showcases. We're not watching highlights from when he was a sophomore in high school. They have amateur coverage, they have draft coverage, they have all that stuff. So they have guys who've been locked in on Max Clark for years and years, and they're very convicted in their beliefs in him. And we take that into account, right? I trust Baseball America's scouting a great deal. It's just we also want to trust ourselves a little bit. And again, this is not to say like all 3 of these guys could be top 30 prospects in baseball. It's a good problem to have. We just You can look at it. Cole Keith was in AAA. Jackson Jobe made it to AA, and Max Clark was in low A. Like, we're just a little bit more confident in the guys who have gone higher. That's it. Max Clark has a huge ceiling.
And I don't think that. I mean, the thing is that with process, it's just lists. I mean, really, it's just a list to have debates, and this is what we're doing right now. And a lot of times, I love people talking about us about what went in the process and why certain things went the way they are. And even my initial reaction when Clark was drafted that night, the more I get to know, the more, like I said, it was. I think if there's one thing about Max Clark that I like is the fact that he will do all the little things to get there. I mean, you were talking about somebody was giving him crap about cleaning out the dugout, and it's like, no, that's what you do as a baseball player. And Clark is definitely team oriented. As far as the skill set goes, I could see why. I mean, he is fast. I mean, that first hit he got that we have on our shorts channel on YouTube, I mean, you see him right out of the box. I mean, he's blazing fast, and it's good speed. It's good plus speed. The bat is there. I think it's just it's just an adjustment. And thinking about like all the pageantry with the draft and everything else that goes with it, comparatively speaking to number 6 to Kevin McGonigal, McGonigal went out there and just raked. And we'll talk about him here in a second, but I think Clark will be fine. I think Max Clark will be somebody that will be speaking of more of, and hopefully now that Lakeland will have video, if he starts the season, Lakeland will actually have the ability to pull that too. And who knows, he might be part of that game, the spring training showcase.
I would be shocked if he's not part of the what is it, spring breakout. I would think he would be probably batting leadoff and playing center field in that, because I don't think they're gonna have Parker Meadows there. I think he'll be in big league camp. But yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to like about him. It's not like you said, the speed, but it's also the instincts, the aggressiveness, the defense, the arm. He was a very, pitching in the low 90s as a lefty. I think there's some pop there, in the hitting, supposed to be one of his best tools. So it's just like to your point, it's just a ranking. Like, we didn't have Justice Bigby on our top 30 to start the year last year. Does that because we suck at ranking and we're bad at understanding prospects? No, it's because nobody had him anywhere, and then he went out and improved, and then he got on our list, and we moved him up. We moved him up because he went out and proved it. It's just the way these things work. And 1 month into the season, things are going to be a lot different, probably, and then 2 months they'll be even more different.
And speaking of improving their stock, if you will, 4 and 5 coming to mind. I mean, Parker Meadows was a couple years ago. We watched enough Parker Meadows in 2019, or I'm sorry, well, yeah, 2019 when we went out there to go see the likes of Andre Lipsius and now former Tiger Nick Quintana. And I remember it's just was one of our first interviews we had with him too. And so his approach to the play, it's far different now. He's a far different player than he was 4 years ago. And Meadows last year, after struggling a little bit when he got to the majors, he finished the season strong and he showed why. And I'm could be more excited about his. I mean, right again, probably by February, or excuse me, probably by end of April, he'll be gone off the list completely. But I really think the way he finished the year strong and just making those adjustments like he does, like he was doing in Erie and then in Toledo, and we saw at the big league level, there's so much potential with that. And Chase Young, I know you're the quote unquote low man on him, but he continued to just his second half numbers were again just out. It kind of I don't think I want to say get overshadowed, Chris, but I don't think they're talked about enough, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I was skeptical of Jace Young for much of the year, and then he was just kind of he was hitting for power in West Michigan, but the average wasn't really there. He needs to do both, and then he got up to Erie and improved both, and had these massive, power outbursts. We were just talking before the game. He had, I think, 5 home runs in 3 games against Somerset. Was it? Um, yeah, he ended up having a terrific season. I think he led the organization in home runs, right? 27, 28.
Yeah,
Um,
I think so. Yeah,
he had one more than Keith, I thought. And uh, And then and then so they go, and when we heard this, that when we were out in Erie, we heard some whispers that, like, hey, they think he could play third base too. And then they went out in the Arizona Fall League and he did it. He only played a handful of games, but he looked fine out there. And we talked the other day, his manager said he had a super strong arm, which is one thing that I did not expect to hear, and I never saw really in person. But he was mostly playing second base. So yeah, I mean, if he can hit like that, he's going to hit with power, left-handed power, to the full field, and play adequate third base. That's a huge. I mean, that's a really good prospect. And it was one of the things when they first drafted him, when we talked about his brother a little bit, where his brother was there were some dings on him, and he just kept getting better and better in the minors, and you're hoping like, okay, maybe he's got that same makeup, and it looks like he might. So yeah, that's. I mean, some people he'll probably be a top 100 prospect to a lot of places, if not universally.
yeah. And there was the thing too that he got a lot of knack, a lot of a lot of flack about his
Sharona?
glove. Sharona. Yeah, he got the knack. 1979, I believe that album came out. Anyway, sorry, I just
Fair enough.
thinking, do I do? But he went out and won Midwestern League second baseman of the year, and
Yeah.
I mean, he got really upset when people talked about his defense, and since day one, I've never understood that because I thought he played adequate defense. If not, he made the good plays. So I that part I didn't understand, Chris, because that was just something that heading into even before last year, I was kind of like I was miffed by the whole thing.
I mean, I expected. It's just one of those things where you see him. He's very hippie. He's shaped slightly odd for an athlete. He doesn't look very fast. It looks like he struggles when he runs. It's one of those things where it just doesn't look right, and so you expect him to not be agile or flexible, and he is. He's 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 never going to be the quickest guy, and he's probably not going to have ideal range at either second base or third base. But yeah, he's got a really good glove and accurate arm. He makes all the plays that you need him to make. That was the main thing. It's and one of the things we like to do, I guess, is it can be really hard to judge a player's defense based on one or two looks. We try to watch all the games, but we can't watch every inning of every game. And so you lean on the announcers, right? The announcers are there every day, and they know which guys can play defense and which guys can't. And yeah, and both Dan Hasty and Greg and Sam all agree that, like, yeah, Young's a pretty good defender. So I trust those guys, and when he never really made a mistake when I watched him, so I'm not really worried about it.
I'm not either, and that's where the next guy, number 6, and Kevin McGonigal, which admittedly, so coming into the draft, I know you get more into the draft than I do, not because by design. I just tend to worry about
Mhm.
every other thing, and then I just when I read about McGonagall, but then hearing the podcast about Baseball America talking about, well, the Tigers got really that's a great pick for him, I never heard too much about him, and then I saw why. I mean, the guy just went into Lakeland, he hit in the playoffs. It's a great eye at the plate. He actually his walk to strikeout ratio was impressive. This is a just kid out of high school from Pennsylvania, and to me, Chris, he probably won him. I think out of the last couple drafts we've seen, I think he made even a more of an impression on me than Cole Keith did when he got drafted when he first came into the system.
Yeah, he's just a pure hitter, a very advanced hitter for his age. And it's one of those things where that was the book, like you said, there's a book coming about him coming in because he had played in just about every potential tournament, showcase everywhere, and he always hit. And so the main questions about him, like feel like you feel comfortable. Worst case scenario, he's going to be a guy who plays a solid second base and hits for average and steals some bases and gets on base. Like uh, questions about him are, can he stick at shortstop? And they're going to try and try until he proves he can't. I wouldn't put it past them. It's just they think the tools might be slightly light there, the arm, the range. But if he does stick at shortstop, then that's another potential probably top 100 guy because shortstops who hit are very valuable. And then the only other question about him is really how much game power there's going to be. And people project kind of fringe average to average, which would be just fine again at shortstop and would be acceptable at second base. Really, I mean, if you're going to hit like we think he might hit, you don't need a ton of pop. Be a valuable middle infielder, right? Placido Polanco never hit more than like 5 or 6 home runs for the Tigers, I don't think. But so yeah, there's a lot to like with McGonagall there too, and yeah, it's gonna be really exciting to watch Clark and McGonagall probably bat 1-2 wherever they're playing for the next couple years.
I would not surprise me if McGonagall starts at West Michigan. Honestly, would not surprise me. I mean, it sounds like an aggressive assignment, but he handled low A pretty well last year. And keep in mind too, the series against Clearwater, they were playing against two guys that were major leaguers that were rehabbing, two pitchers. So McGonagall got to face some big league pitchers and did just fine. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we're pretty high on both those guys. Obviously, they're both in our top 6, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a matter. This is something we'll do later in the off season or close to spring training or whatever. Is go and try to figure out the rosters. Some of it just that was one of the things that JJ Cooper said is that you can go look at second base and just go down the line and find future big leaguer at every level for the Tigers next year if you want to. You got Young, you got Hao Lee, you got McGonagall, you got Russell Perez if you want him. There's a bunch of second basemen. It's just a matter of if any of these guys play shortstop because that would be ideal.
Yeah, I don't think the Tigers have had an embarrassment of riches at second base 30 plus years in the system. I guarantee it. Guarantee it. Other than, if you want to tell me that an SEC or ACC shortstop like Danny Worth was something, then no offense, Danny Worth or anything.
Was Danny Worth from Pepperdine?
Was
Where
he
did he
from
go?
Pepperdine? I thought he went to Virginia. Why did I think he went to Virginia?
Or yeah, I don't know.
We have the internet right in front of us, so we need to take advantage of it. While you look that up.
All right.
All right, wait. You know what? No, let's just look at where Danny Worth went to school because now I'm curious. I thought he went to some. He did go to Pepperdine, didn't he?
Pepperdine University, Malibu,
yeah.
California. Generally considered one of the most beautiful campuses in the country because it's in Malibu. But they had like Brandon Loy, Texas, Brent DeLugash. There's a name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Cale Org was Alabama, I think, right?
Yeah.
But
let's go. Yeah, no offense to the great Pepperdine University, which is a baseball powerhouse. So, my apologies. After a while, all those SEC picks and ACC stuff just blends in after a while.
You can be excused for thinking the Tigers took some people from the SEC.
So, Justin Malloy, he got off to a good start, and then he kind of tailed off a little bit when teams started figuring him out, started jamming him on the inside, and he had to expand his strike zone a little bit and got better. And then he picked it back up again. And the questions are, where does he play defensively? Because I don't think the third base is his long term position, and outfield too might be questionable, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough because he had a very good offensive season. I think we talked about it before that I think his best month was actually August. Uh, he kind of tailed off and then had a monster month where he was hitting for power and getting on base all the time. But yeah, it's not going to work at third base despite how much they were playing him down the stretch. We don't think it's going to work. It's he's got throwing issues. He kind of tends to throw off balance. He tends to rush things. The glove is a little bit stiff, and so you can field it cleanly, and then you're rushing the throw, and then bad things happen. I think he can be fine in the outfield. We talked earlier, there's some goofy plays he made out there, which is understandable for somebody who's transitioning. I, I I do tend to think that his best position may be first base or DH, which is tough when you've got one of the cornerstones of your franchise is Spencer Torkelson, who's playing first base and maybe a DH himself if he doesn't kind of improve his defense there. So um, yeah, it's hard to find a spot for him, but again, I think as J.J. Cooper mentioned, like if he can get on base, they'll find a spot for him, and they'll keep working on his defense. And you can hide him in left field or right field if you need to. Maybe say you got Jack Flaherty on the mound, who's supposedly more of a ground ball pitcher. I can put him in left field or right field depending on the lineup, and you may be able to get away with it. We've seen Kerry Carpenter improve in the outfield in the majors, so I think that's probably where he'll play this year. But we'll see. It's a good bat.
It's a good bet. No, I'm sorry, I muted myself. Let me see. Hold on, I gotta make sure I make an edit point here. Where am I at? Well, I actually can do this. So, I mean, we already talked about with Montero and Gibson Long. We talked about them a little bit. Ty Madden coming in at number 10. I know Colin was very high on him, and I started becoming high on him the last. Like, he struggled against lefties all season. That was his big thing, locating that fastball so they could turn their hands on it instead of just, I don't know, rocking it out of the park. But he was tough as nails down in the playoffs. Was really good down the stretch. Turned over some really quality innings. He looked like an ace for the Seawolves, and I think really the last month I was really impressed with his progress of his command of his fastball, which is his secondary stuff. I mean, the first start of the season, remember, he went up against Gavin Williams, Chris. It was a pitcher's duel. It was like, what, 40 degrees out? It was like kind of really nasty out. And he looked, I mean, our jaws were dropping because that curveball was ridiculous.
Yeah, I used to remember, I thought it was like 10 strikeouts in 4 innings or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe it was, yeah, he was just absolutely dominant. But then, he never quite showed that level of dominance for the rest of the year. Like, he would have flashes. And a lot of times he would have really good outings for the 4 innings, and the 5th inning would get into trouble. And it just wasn't, I don't know. I've struggled because I was really high on Ty Madden early on from the beginning of previous season when we were like, hey, he's made some mechanical adjustments. He's throwing really hard. The slider looks good. I think he's added a cutter, all this stuff. And then, I was at a game and we had a scout just absolutely kill him. Just kill him. Say the fastball was garbage. The curveball was a 20. The slider was a 30. I'm like, man. And it's a scout I trust. He was one of the scouts that he identified Montero very early on as a guy who was very promising. But then it was kind of heartening to hear J.J. Cooper go through his note. He said, I'll go through my notes and see one guy say, this guy's breaking ball is absolute garbage. It won't play in the big leagues. And then another scout seems the exact same player and says, I really love his breaking ball. And it's like, you know what? Not everybody knows everything. And we watched just as much Ty Madden as anybody, and you can do your best to say, hey, I see these traits. The curveball's not going to work. This is bad. But sometimes guys just have really rough outings. And you see them at their absolute worst or their absolute best. So I don't know. I still go up and down with Ty Madden. The arm is great. I haven't seen the level of um, dominance and consistency to I didn't put them above Gibson Long and Montero, but they're all right there in that same cluster, and it wouldn't shock me in the slightest if Ty Madden ends up better than those other two. Right? This Cooper thought that if a team was trading, they'd want Madden more than Gibson Long and Montero, and that may very well be true. So just it was pretty close for me.
Yeah, I would think too that one of the things about Ty Madden's character or his game this year in terms of command wise, and I mentioned it earlier about the fastball command, but I think it was also making it just seem like the adjustments of when to throw things too was different than it was last year. And like, if for example, if there were if the play or for the pitch called for like a slot or a curve or something like that, or whatever the case was, I just felt like he had. I'm trying to describe it as best way I can. It's just I felt that he made better decisions on the mound too this year than he did last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of the process of learning how to pitch in pro baseball. You know, obviously he's been pitching for a long time, pitching college, pitching big games in college at Texas. But you know, the players always get better the higher up you go. And you know, I'm looking at his splits right now, and it was a pretty pedestrian April, and then May and June were iffy. 816 OPS against 902 OPS, but then a really good July, 542 OPS. Back to iffy in August, 799, and then September, 476. It was, you know, in his final 12 starts, he pitched generally very well. There were some home run issues in August, and you know that goes back to the lefty righty splits. But he did seem to improve on that as the course of the season went on. Like you said, it was, I want to say his OPS was well over 1,000 against lefties heading into that final 3 month stretch, and ended up at 871, which is not great, but it's, you know, survivable if your OPS against righties is 557, which it was. So Um, you know, teams are going to keep loading up lefties and making him get them out, but that might just be the final hurdle he needs to clear, right? Is to learn to backdoor the slider, feel more comfortable with the changeup, work on the cutter, things like that, or as you said, you know, locate his fastball better.
And I think he's going to start the season in Toledo. If we're gonna, I don't think that's too much of a stretch to see him start the season in Toledo. Toledo's rotation, we were talking about some potential how that's going to look, and I think it's on. As Mark reminded me, Mark Urash of the Days of War podcast said, and I quote, Roger, they end up finishing with the second best ERA in baseball. Who cares how the rotation started in Toledo? You're right, because they did get some help from Toledo. That being said, I think there's just more prospect laden compared to speaking to some of the journeymen we saw last year, start the year there. So, and Madden, I think if Madden can handle Toledo, who knows? He could potentially be that 9 for 10 starter that the
Yep.
Tigers end up going with. Again, I still think that there might be potentially, I don't want to say he's going to be traded or anything like that, but the Tigers could trade a starter for a bat. Who knows? It's still time left in the offseason to see that.
And just to go back a little bit to Jackson Jobe, right? And, you know, he was dominant, looked awesome in high A, looked good in his Double A debut, looked good in the Arizona Fall League. You never know. You never know with pitchers. Matt Manning looked absolutely dominant in Double A, won the Eastern League Pitcher of the Year, and then struggled in Triple A and has been just kind of pedestrian in the big leagues. Reese Olson got absolutely demolished in Triple A to begin the year, and then he got a little bit better, and then he got to the big leagues and was really very good for a rookie. So it's hard to know, and these pitchers can take leaps at any time, and we're just trying to judge the raw tools, which are certainly there for Madden and Montero and Gibson Long and all these guys, and it's just about what kind of adjustments they can make as they continue to climb the ladder.
Yeah, and again, these teams also have some data that helps them make these decisions. I
Yep.
mean, it's one of those things where we had a comment about how analytics are a bad thing, but in reality, in this case, if you looked at just the stats alone, if you looked at the box score of Reese Olson and his ERA in Toledo, you would. I know everybody was like, "Why are they calling him up?" There was something
Mhm.
beyond that the Tigers had, and we're able to see it and see that okay, if he just makes this adjustment and this adjustment, he'll be fine, and that's the case. End of
And
story.
yeah, and batted ball luck is a real thing.
Yeah.
You know, you might see a guy hitting 220 and be like, "Oh, he's garbage," and then you look under the hood and okay, he's crushing the ball. It's just, you know, 5 or 6 hits that should be, you know, doubles ended up in somebody's mitt just the way it was. And so that's where the underlying data obviously helps the analytics there.
Yeah, absolutely. So number 11, we talked about Bigby quite a bit, so I think we go right into Yu Lee because we didn't see a lot of him when he came over. He had that injury, so but you could see what he was supposed to I think he made a game. Did he appear in the Arizona Fall League for like a game?
He played a fair amount in the Arizona Fall. I think he ended up playing as many games as Young. I'm checking right now.
Okay, because I thought it was
Uh,
maybe later in the Arizona Fall League he made appear then.
he did. He showed up later, but I'm looking, and he played 13 games in the AFL, which is
Oh,
actually
okay.
more than he played for the Tigers after he came over the trade. He only played 8 games for West Michigan. And in the AFL, he hit .265 with 9 walks and 12 strikeouts, hit a homer and 2 doubles. Uh, it's kind of what we expected. He's a guy who's going to make some contact. He's going to hit. He's going to walk a little bit, and he'll show a little bit of pop. And again, it's they played him a little bit at shortstop. He's probably a second baseman, and it's just a matter of how much power he hits for that determines how far he goes and how high he ranks. But that's a guy who's a potential average everyday second baseman, which is not bad for your number 12 prospect in the system, I don't think.
No, and that was a good trade for. He came over in the Michael Lorenzen trade, and it was something that Scott Harris told us that he identified that it was a guy he liked, and I guarantee you, maybe he was asked about originally in the trade for Gregory Soto, and they
Um,
just earmarked him and said, "Hey, maybe we should come back and see if we can acquire him." And that was somebody Scott Harris was very, very high on him, and rightfully so. The power's there, and I mean, outside his glove, I wish I saw more of his glove, and I have to go back through what I saw in the Arizona Fall. I have to go back and check out what he did in the Arizona Fall League glove wise, but there's I thought it was adequate from the 8 games I saw at
yeah,
West
I
Michigan.
mean, he's another guy where you might get kind of fooled just by his build. He's a shorter, stockier guy. You might think that maybe he's not gonna be a great defender, but, yeah, I think from everything I've seen, he's just perfectly solid there at second base, and like I said, they may even play him at third base a little bit, but, it's his bat that's gonna carry him, and, it'll be interesting to see where if he starts back at West Michigan or if they move him out to Erie to start the year.
Yeah, you know what? I probably could see him starting in West Michigan for just a minute, then going to Erie. But then again, I mean, also, I mean, West Michigan too. You got Luke Gold to think of. There's a lot of
Yeah,
there's almost like a log jam of sorts if you think about it. What they're gonna how that's gonna play. And Luke Gold comes up later in our conversation at number 30.
mhm,
But these next two, Chris, if we could put 2023, 2023 was a strange year in a sense for these two guys. Number 13 being Wilmer Flores, the other being number 14, Troy Melton. Troy Melton came out of nowhere. Came out of nowhere, was one of the only a few effective pitchers the Lakeland had, and was called up to West Michigan and continued to get better. Baseball America, like Jeff Pontus, was very high on him. They speak very highly of him. I think they have him in their top 10, I believe.
I think he's 10th, yeah.
Yeah, he's number 10. And Melton, we saw him. We saw a start of his at South Bend. Thanks again to a friend of the show, Charlie, for hosting us down there this week or when we were down there. And he struggled a little bit, but he came back, was in, and then started specifically against South Bend. The Cubs had a couple of they had an international catcher that was really good, and
Yeah.
he
Wheeler?
hunkered down. Yeah, I think, but you could see where possibly you could see. And JJ Cooper talked about him being a reliever. The arm for that there is a risk for Flores. There might be a potential reliever there too because he was trying to learn a third pitch this year, trying to learn a changeup. Didn't throw it effectively. Then he was injured. He had a leg or a hamstring injury, I believe it was in August. Then he comes out in the playoffs. But even before then, Chris, the dominant Flores we saw the year before wasn't there. He was like a bull. He toughed it out during starts, but a lot of times it wasn't the crisp innings we're used to, and the slider looked a little. It just when you lose a little velocity in a fastball, your slider is not going to look as effective. But there's times though where his fastball was at 96, 95, 96 out of nowhere, and then just went back down.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been fascinating. He's a very classic case of, development just doesn't work the way you'd like it to all the time, and he was a guy that kind of popped up. He was in the Arizona Fall League 2 seasons ago, so we get to look at the data, I'm like, "Man, he's throwing 97, 98 with his high spin breaking balls," and he didn't pitch well in the AFL because he was walking too many guys, and there was some real questions about his delivery and could he be a starter or reliever, and then he came out in 2022, he was throwing really hard and throwing tons of strikes, and despite kind of a reliever-ish delivery, at least with his follow through, um, and like he just kept proving it. He pitched right through West Michigan. It took him 5-6 outings. They're like, okay, he's too good for this. And he held his own in Double-A, pitched really well. We thought he'd start in Toledo last year, and then they started him right back in Erie, and he spent the whole year there. And like you said, the big thing with him, they were trying to work on adding that changeup, and he did throw it. We saw a handful of them. They weren't very good. He would occasionally flash one that was like sort of close to average. But yeah, the big thing was the velocity. And people ask like, "Hey, what happened to Flores?" And it's yeah, when you go from sitting 94 to 95 and touching 98 to sitting 91 to 93 and touching 95, that's an issue. And we never really saw it resolve. He would, like you said, he would occasionally scrape 95, 96. Um, and then at the same time, outside of a couple starts at the beginning of the year, his results were mostly fine. He just wasn't missing nearly as many bats. And I think to your point, the slider doesn't play as well when people don't, have the extra tick to hit the fastball. And then he went to the FL and actually, again, throwing tons of strikes, getting lots of strikeouts, but gave up a ton of hits too. So I don't know. It's we just dropped him down because he just wasn't as dominant. Right? It's there's still that back end starter potential there or a solid relief potential. It's just he didn't perform as well or look as good as he did the year before.
I honestly thought heading into the season that he potentially, yeah, we were just like mentioned, we thought he'd start in the season in Toledo and maybe be a starter. But yeah, if you can't throw a third pitch, you have that reliever risk. And I think what will be interesting in 2024 is, do the Tigers approach him to say, "Hey, we're going to take you as a reliever," and if so, does that change that you can be the ability to air it out and throws it harder again like he did before, or he wants to be a starter? I, talking to him earlier in the spring training, he doesn't seem to mind what role it is. But however, this is a big season for him because it's either the Tigers development staff has some ideas for him. He might have his own ideas of his own. And that's where sometimes it's like he's at an interesting crossroad heading into 2024.
And I remember he was a top 100 prospect heading into last year to both MLB Pipeline and Baseball Prospectus. So like he was a highly regarded guy, and it didn't look the same. And just to touch on Melton real quick, yeah, there's a ton to like there in terms of his size, his velocity, his pitch mix. I don't know if there's a true plus pitch in his entire arsenal, but he might end up with 455s or 450 or 350s and a 55, something like that. And given his build and his velocity, there's a potential workhorse number 4 starter, and the amount of improvement he made over the course of the season and from the year before gives you hope that he can continue to improve. But again, it's a guy, he topped out in high A, and so we just kind of kept him in that second. I guess this would be the third tier or the lower end of the second tier of starters. If Job is on a tier of his own, then we have this other cluster of pitchers that we like, but just not quite as much a Job, right?
Yeah, and Job's in a class of his own.
Yeah.
You name sort of to list. I mean, we added him obviously to our midseason update, and then he's Leonard. And 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, like the next 5, essentially, a lot of the names you might be familiar with, but the reason why Eddie Leonard is going to eventually probably be in the outfield. I was talking to, when we talked to JJ Cooper about that, his glove at shortstop plays into question a little bit. I thought his glove was fine, but maybe I need to see more of a sample size. But I got to give a lot of props to Wenzel Perez at number 16 for 2 reasons. One, he was dealing with back issues all year, and you could tell that it robbed away some of his power because his power numbers have went down significantly. But 2, they asked him to go play the outfield, and he plays a hell of an outfield. I mean, he did a really good, it seemed like a natural out there after having the yips again at second base. And we saw that with Chris Myers this year. We saw that with Trey Cruz. The Tigers don't normally, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but the Tigers don't normally change positions drastically unless it's like kind of like a last option, right?
Generally not. I think that's changed obviously with the
Right.
new regime and the new dev staff, where they want to put players where they think they can succeed, and also just see like, hey, how's this work? They're not taking people and putting them crazy out of position. Just like, they didn't put Chris Myers in center field, but they're like, he can run a little bit. He's not, speed burner, but they thought we'd like this bat. Let's see him in the corner. And with Winslow Perez, it was always kind of natural fit, right? But he came up as a shortstop and played a lot of third base, and eventually it was just like, it's not going to work on the left side of the infield. It's the arm, the throwing decisions, and arm strength is fine. It's just we've seen he has a little bit of I would say a mental issues there with consistently throwing. We saw it at second base for a while, and you're right. They put him out in center field, and he's got the natural speed, and he seemed to have pretty solid reads and reactions, and that and I think ultimately that's his role is probably a utility guy. But when you add center field to that, that makes you a lot more valuable. And, and yeah, and then he was struggling to hit for the first couple months, and then had a nice, really extra base free. I want to say starting in August, and then on top of that, yeah, again for a guy who's struggling with back issues, he went out and stole more bases than he ever had in a season. So hopefully the injury has healed up there, and he's a guy. He's on the 40-man roster. We'll probably see him in the big leagues at some point this year, but it's I don't know if he's ever going to be an everyday regular, but he may go out there and prove that he can do it if they give him a chance.
Yeah, somebody that could just at least be a difference maker in the sense of just going out there and being an average player. And that's something that, if you notice, that JJ Cooper was talking about, and a little bit with Darko, was getting average production. I mean, I don't think that's too much to ask. And JJ was really adamant about the Tigers system having not able to do that. And so 17, 18, 19, 17, 18, 19 in Dingler, Pacheco, and Brent Hurdler. Dingler has been the yo-yo of our list, but I still think Dingler, there's a lot of potential with Dingler. His glove, again, Erie's rotation and we've talked about this numerous times, how well Erie's rotation got when he got there after he was healthy, significantly. But Pacheco at number 18, I know he dropped a little bit, and some people were like, well, he's a high draft pick. He shouldn't be on the list at all, but he's only 20 years old. He's fine. And he just, maybe it's just between the ears or something like that, but his glove still plays well. I think personally, I think it's just, again, maybe just making some more adjustments. He started making it towards the end of the season, and Hurler put himself up there because the guy busted his ass, and the 18 scoreless innings in the playoffs help, and he was like a different pitcher, and he had more swing and miss stuff. If I got to do the stat drive on that, but Chris, I don't know what your thoughts are about if you want to finish up with Perez or continue on.
Yeah, and no, I mean we can with Dingler. It was just every year I kind of feel more convinced that it's probably a backup ceiling. He's always had really good tools, and we've liked, and he works well with the pitching staff, but just the defense, I don't think is there to carry him as an everyday hitter. You never know with catchers. We didn't think Jake Rogers could do it, and then he came up and hit for a ton of power, enough to make it work. But with him, it was still mostly defense, and I think that's going to be Dingler's role. Um, yeah, with Brant Herter, I've always been kind of high on Brant Herter, despite it's just tough. There's not much ceiling there. And it's kind of a funky look. He's a big-bodied lefty with a lower arm slot, but I've always liked his slider. He's always seemed to locate his fastball, and the changeup I think has taken strides forward. And so he's just a really effective pitcher in the minors. And I don't know if it works as a starter in the big leagues. That's kind of why I have him. I think I had him 16th on my list in this general range, 15 to 25. Um, and he may settle in as kind of a swingman, but yeah, it's hard to get upset about the way he's performed. He was awesome down the stretch for Erie, and he was really consistent in the first half of the year too. And I remember I did a whole post on it, I think, in our last update about how he actually pitched just as well through like underlying stats. In the second half, he just ran into severe bad luck, whereas he had some pretty good luck in the first half. So I don't know. Again, he's like the last guy on our second tier of pitching, where he may eventually develop into a number 4 starter, but I feel more like a swingman profile there.
Yeah, he led the league. Yeah, excuse me, he led the organization in FIP. He had the lowest FIP with the 2.91, and he was the only one that had it under 3. And his K per 9 was a 10.14. So it plays a little better than what people anticipate. But again, having that conversation with him about what changed was like, well, he changed the paint. The Tigers, he went, I think it was his chain. He learned a cutter, and that really helped. And that made a result. And the K percentage, 26.7, Chris. that to me shows a guy who that's kind of what you're talking about, the ultimate swingman thing. If he can make that adjustment, and that's comparatively speaking, I mean, you look at his numbers about the same than it was in terms of his K percentage in 2022, and but still, it just felt. But he was holding. I mean, batters were only they're still teeing off of him as much. They're hitting the ball with hard contact in 2022. Last year, teams only hit 238 against him, and that's a big
It,
difference.
and with him, it's kind of a little bit like we've seen with the other guys. He's just murder on left-handed hitters. They don't do anything against him. 191 last year, 5 walks and 52 strikeouts. They had 3 doubles and 1 triple. No home runs. So it's, yeah, so 469 OPS against lefties. Like they just can't do anything against them. And his issue will be how does he combat righties? So yeah, pounding him inside, locating the slider away, getting that change up, working a cutter, all that's going to help him there. But it was still pretty good against righties. 749 OPS is, again, it's not great, but yeah, I mean that's going to determine what his ultimate role is. I think is how much better he can get against righties because yeah, there's a potential left-handed reliever in there for sure based on the numbers against lefties.
Yeah, and we know how AJ Hinch likes to have those type of pitchers they use matchup wise, and so if he has the ability, if you think about it too, the grand scheme of things with the loss of Tyler Alexander, I think it might have helped him move up a little
Mhm.
bit because obviously the Tigers signing Andrew Chafin for a 1-year deal. Maybe they're also looking at it as okay, maybe it gives another year for Hurdler to get prepared or maybe potentially get a call up at 2024 at some point.
Yeah.
I really think if he does well in Toledo, you could see him at some point in Detroit, if depending on how they want to use him. But as far as Pacheco goes, at number 18, I really want to circle back to him for just a moment because I think Pacheco could easily get back in the top 10 with a like that. There's so much potential in that bat, Chris, and I think with the way the Tigers have been, now we've seen it with pitching and we've seen it now a little bit with hitting too. I think he still has some ways to, excuse me, he can really within just probably with a month of baseball do just jump back in there.
Yeah, it's with him, it's about, I don't know if it's necessarily about swing decisions, but it's about kind of improving his plate coverage. Um, we talked about it a couple times where it felt like if he wasn't getting the ball kind of middle, he was having a hard time hitting it, and JJ Cooper mentioned on it, you know, if you throw it away from him, he's not gonna hit it the other way. Whereas, you know, I think he used the comparison of, like, Justice Bigby. It's like, you know, give Isaac Pacheco a little bit of that opposite field approach. Uh, and that may just be something that Pacheco needs to develop. It may be something he can't, but he's certainly got the raw power to if, you know, they pitch him away, he's got the ability to just poke it the opposite way for a home run. So you'd like to see him adjust that approach, but as you pointed out, you know, he was 20 all season. He'll be 21 all he just turned 21 last month. He's gonna be 21 all this year. If he spends the whole year in West Michigan again, that doesn't mean he's not a prospect. You'd like to see improvement. But he has the power potential, and as you touched on, his glove at third base is really good. He's you know, he'll make some errors. Probably just needs more and more reps. But if he hits, he could be your everyday third baseman down the line because power potential and the defense is both pretty damn good.
Yeah, and his glove has been no issue since he converted down to third. I mean, remember he started at short when he was in Lakeland, and then they moved him over to
Yeah.
third.
They
So
even played. He played some shortstop last year just because you know
yeah,
they're like we need a shortstop, and he played, and he was acceptable. You know, it's not the sort of thing I think you'll see him do at higher levels, but yeah, he's a good athlete, good mover. So yeah, he's just a classic case of a guy who he had a down year, so we moved him down. Doesn't mean he can't move back up this year.
yeah, and that's the same could be said. And speaking of that, for the last from 20 to 30, the same could be said about Roberto Campos. Last year, it was I think, or this past season, one of the funniest interactions we had is when we were at West Michigan, and Tony
Yeah.
Paul from the Detroit News, great guy, he thought about. He asked us what he thought about Roberto Campos. I'm like, oh no, yeah, I think he holds his own in the outfield. He's like, oh, I've heard kind of a butcher out there, and we're like,
Yeah.
what do you? Yeah, I think he's gonna be fine. And is with 20 minutes later, as he made 2 errors within like that. It just turns a defensively line out there, and that was not too after. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but it wasn't after that Brady Allen came into the picture. They got him in a trade, and that shored up.
Yeah.
I think that really helped. That saved that West Michigan outfield for the season. Really, I really believe that because then Brady Allen, who just missed our top 30. I think Brady Allen's going to be a guy that will probably be on our top 30 here probably shortly because I would like to see what he does in Erie, but
Yeah, same here.
Campos for again another example like Pacheco. It's just an age thing, and I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, and we were really high on Campos to begin the year because he was hitting well, he was showing power. He still wasn't really lifting the ball as much as he needs to for a guy who has that much raw power. But then I think roughly second, third month of the season, opposing pitchers was like, you know what, we're just not going to throw you a fastball anywhere in the middle or the middle third of the plate or the middle of the plate. They just stop. They throw fastballs up or down or away, and then they just we're getting them with breaking balls and changeups. And the thing is, he's got the bat to ball skills. He was putting that all in play for the most part. You didn't strike out a crazy amount, but he stopped walking because he's just one of those guys who has those natural bat to ball skills. And in some regards, it's a little bit of like a worrisome throwback to the Alavila era where everybody they targeted had these to ball skills, but couldn't, they were detrimental almost. Victor Reyes and Dabo Lugo and all these guys who could put the bat in the ball, but they weren't selective enough with the pitches that they were swinging at. And so you hope that Campos can improve that in his second go around in West Michigan. I assume he'll be back there, but there's still, and I said it before, like there's not a fastball that dude can't hit or pull. And the example I always use is Jacob Mizurowski, who was one of the hardest throwing pitchers in professional baseball. He was the star of the Futures game. He was pitching for Beloit, I think it was.
Yeah, Beloit. Yeah.
Or maybe Wisconsin.
No. It
The
was
Timber Rattlers.
Timber Rattlers. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And he was mowing down
Man,
West Michigan lineup. I think the first time through the
one of the best pitchers I've seen all year in the Midwest League.
And I think Campos got up 2-0 and he threw him a fastball, like a 99-mile-an-hour fastball inside, and Campos just yanked it right over the third baseman's head because he can hit a fastball. And that's the key. Like, your strengths. If he can get to a point where he's laying off the borderline pitches and fighting them off and gets into fastball counts, he can really do a lot of damage. And that's, I think, next step for him. This is what he needs to do is just improve the plate discipline in that regard.
And the glove too. I mean, I think that's where the
One
glove.
thing at a time.
Yeah, the glove.
No, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. Like, yeah, he has the physical ability to. He was playing center field. You would think it would be a corner in the future, just because he's going to continue to fill out a little bit, and the physical ability is there. It's just he made a lot of really curious decisions and strange plays and bad reads, and it's a guy who needs to get out there and shag about 1,000 fly balls every week, I think, to get a better feel. But yeah, that's again, hasn't played a ton of baseball. Guy who was part of the 2019 international signing class, I think, wasn't able to play in 2020, and never played in a foreign rookie league. Just came right up to the Florida Complex League, and so yeah, there's a lot of learning left to do.
Yeah, and I think he'll get like the same thing. Like as we mentioned earlier, it's just like Pacheco, and the same thing with another guy on the list too. We'll get to in a second, but 21, Paul Wilson. High school arm, son of a former major leaguer. I think it makes sense to have him there. We didn't get a chance to see him, but it could probably start the season. More than likely, could see him complex for a minute, then go to Lakeland. But as far as as far as Kreidler and Lipsius go, we've said plenty. So, but go ahead about Wilson.
Well, it was Wilson. I don't remember. It came out after they drafted him that he had. I don't know if it was a torn UCL. I don't know if he had Tommy John surgery or I don't remember exactly, but it was. He's a guy that we might not see in full season ball until the second half of last year or next year. But some of that he may have fallen to them because of that. Yeah, he was considered one of the better left-handed prep pitchers in the entire draft. He's a guy who's been up to the upper 90s, has 3 secondary offerings. When I looked at his, some of his prep pitching, it was a little loose. The breaking balls, they weren't always tight. They weren't always the way that they need to be located. But you see the potential there, and he's a guy that I could see easily moving up into the top 10 down the road just because of the pure ability. But it's, high school pitching is terribly risky. So you never know. he may never fully recover. He may never make another top 30 for us. But yeah, so I agree. I think this is about the right spot for him.
With a little instruction, I think he'd be fine. I talk about some of the mechanics, things that could be easily cleaned up, and so I can see why
Yeah.
the Tigers drafted that
Yeah,
potential.
physical ability is there, and the size and the pitch mix and all that stuff. There's a lot to like there. It's just got to go out and do it and throw strikes.
So, like I said, Kreidler, Lipsius, 22,
I remember
23.
we took Kreidler off our list at the beginning of last year because we're like, he's gonna exhaust his prospect eligibility in like 2 weeks, and then he just kept getting hurt, and he's a guy who's got the ability to play shortstop at the big league level. He's got some power, just never hit a ton. Couldn't stay healthy, so we threw him back on the list because there's in the 40 man. There's big league ability there. It's just who knows what's going to happen with him. And same with Lipsis. Lipsis came up, hit a big league home run. I don't know if he hit more than one, um, but he's a guy we've always liked. But again, it's always been a little bit fringy in terms of the overall skill set. He's a valuable depth piece to have. I just don't know if he's got enough ability to start at start at second base, start at third base in the big league.
Yeah, and hit with power consistently too. That's another thing.
And he was
too.
playing a lot of first base too, right? In the
Correct,
outfield.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, because Hinch wanted to see what he could do at first base because they really didn't have a alternative for first base. I mean, when they got Mark Canha, he's going to play some first base to for Torkelson because Torkelson, I think, had almost played 150 games or something like that. Something.
Yeah. And they had Nevin, but they've so
yeah.
I mean we're getting in the 20 range. These are guys who have big league ability, but it's they need an opportunity and need to take steps forward to advantage of it.
So then there's a new name in our top 20 in our top 30, and you got the pronunciation correctly, Chris. So
Josue Briseño. Yeah. 2020 international signing, 2021 international signing. Came out in 2022, was fine in the Dominican Summer League, and then really just didn't stop hitting this year. Walked, hit for power, made it up to Lakeland at the end of the season, and continued to hit.
Yeah, pretty
And
good
so
postseason too.
Yeah, he did, and we could actually go through and watch some of his games. I think I went and watched 5 or 6 of his games from the Florida Complex League Tigers, and you see a guy who has a really good feel for hitting. Like it's he doesn't chase. He'll swing over the top of good changeups down and away, which is not all that uncommon for a young left-handed hitter, right? Like it takes a while to pick up that, but he really picks up spin well. I was impressed. Like he picks it up and hits it hard, and he's kind of the opposite of Pacheco and Campos, where if you throw him on the outside part of the plate, he will happily hit it to left center and hit it pretty hard. And so, I mean, this is not the world's best look at him because the camera we have, it's multiple. It is kind of fun look though.
Yeah,
But
I like the split angle there.
so yeah, I mean, the first game that we have, there's that changeup blown away that got him. But then he had a couple really good games where he went like 3 for 5, took a couple walks. So I feel fairly comfortable about his offensive ability. The one question you have is he's got kind of a funny stance and setup. You don't really see it here. He gets into hitting position, but he starts with his hands around his belly button. He thinks that one you can see. I don't know how far that one hit. We'll see at the bottom. No, maybe not. And I just worry a little bit. I didn't see him against premium velocity. I saw him handle 90 to 94, 95 just fine, but I didn't see anything above 95, and I worry that maybe he won't be able to deal with that because it does feel like maybe strength over bat speed.
That's
But
something that Jeff Pontus mentioned too. Remember?
yeah, but that's kind of a common complaint about guys this size is maybe he's not a quick twitch guy, and you could see he's a 20 runner. He's for an 18-year-old, he was already like 6'4", listed 6'4", 200. I think he's probably more like 6'3", 215, 220. So you worry about that a little bit. And the main question I had, and I think everybody has, is can he stick a catcher? And I'm skeptical, just again based on the size and age already. But when you watch him catch, he does seem to have good hands. If that makes sense. Like he's I don't know how to describe it other than like you see the good hands because he's not blocking balls very well. He just kind of picks them right out of the dirt. Like I do think he might be a really good first baseman based on that. You'd like to see him a little more agile behind the plate, moving around instead of trying to block that way. And his arm is fine. I got him a couple pops. One was like 195, one was like 202. So that's 50-55 arm strength. But both of the throws were one tailed off to the first base side, one tailed off to the third base side. And again, it's just 2 looks. So I gave him an average arm. Um, but you know, like I said, the offensive he looks like a hitter to me. We'll see at higher levels, but um, then the question, because if he doesn't stick at catcher and he plays first base, he's really going to have to hit a ton and hit with a lot of power. I think it might be in there, but it just makes it a lot riskier.
What I did like about his hitting ability, and this was something that came out against Clearwater too, both his hits that we got, thank you, courtesy of Sherry, was opposite field. He just like that, just so the one he hit, he just did right there. Same thing. He just took what was given to him and dumped it to left. And I really liked it too, because I think it was against some major league pitching too. So it was against two guys that were rehabbing. So that's a strong sign. I agree with you, Chris, about long-term wise, if where he's going to in terms of like just if he can
107
handle.
miles off the bat. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah,
The
that's
hit we
the
just
same.
saw was 107.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
ridiculous. If he can handle fastballs up and in, or how can you turn on those convert? Because his bat speed is kind of something I worry about long term against higher advanced velocity. But overall, this is a good sign to see here. Is that a home run?
No, it's a deep fly ball.
Oh, I thought
But
that was,
he does have one home run in this. And there's a couple that there's one he hits like 380 feet foul. Um, yeah, it's I don't know, like he's one of the more promising young hitters. It'll be fun. Like I said, it'll be fun to watch.
see
I
another
could
example.
see I could see Clark batting first, McGonigal batting second, and Briseño batting third or fourth for Lakeland, and then later West Michigan this year if things work out, and that'll be a lot of fun. It's But we've seen, you know, I try to get a little. I don't know. Again, we want to be a little bit more conservative with these guys that we like in rookie ball,
Right.
and even in low A. Santana, Campos, all these guys. They've shown us some things, and then it just doesn't continue to get better. So, but I feel pretty good about his hitting ability, and we'll see this year.
By the way, props to the Phillies folks to create this on YouTube. This is great. I love this. Like this, having all this data and having two different types of camera angles is it's awesome. Really like it.
Yeah, when we first started getting this, I'm like, huh, do I want to crop it out and just show you the top one? Do I want to show you the bottom one? And it's like, no, you just show the whole thing.
Yeah.
And they don't always have it. There are a couple games where it was just one look and the top screen would be frozen and then we weren't getting the extra data, but whatever. I think it's a fun look for people.
Yeah, I think that if games, if every once in a while they show that a game on Major League Baseball that way. I mean, they do have stat games like that. So, real quick, final five before we get out of here: Max Anderson, number 25; Santana, 26; Tyler Madsen, number 27. Then we got two new folks to round out our top 30. Number 28 comes in as Andrew Magno. Number 29, Chris Myers, and actually, I'm sorry, 3. Number 30 in Luke Gold. Now, Max Anderson, second round draft pick, got off to a really good start. Really was a big difference for Lakeland down the stretch. And I believe correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. He was, I mean, that tour. I want to say he was tail end of that stretch where they went like 20-4 in July, I think, or like just, or I mean, they were unbeatable in July and August.
Yeah, I'm not sure when he joined
I
Lakeland.
think he was one of the first
Checking
guys that came there signed right away, right?
Yeah, he would have. He played 32 games for Lakeland and none in rookie ball. So yeah, he probably came right at the tail end of July or maybe early August. And yeah, he's an advanced college hitter, so you want to see he did what you expect out of a college hitter, right? He hit 289, couple of home runs, 12 doubles, 12 walks, 26 strikeouts in 32 games. It's a solid percentage there. He's another one though where the question just kind of becomes, where do you play him on defense? As a second baseman, does he have to play first base? But uh, as JJ Cooper was pointing out, looking at this Tigers system is a lot different over the last couple of years, and a lot of it is the guys they've added in the last draft, where they're just tons of guys who can hit. or you feel comfortable projecting them to hit, and it's just like, all right, well, where are they going to play? And Anderson's another one of those, but yeah, I mean, we had some comments that said, hey, he should be a lot higher, but again, it's just want to go out and see it a little bit more. Like I said, he did what you would expect. He didn't like blow the doors off anybody in pro ball. He did what advanced college hitters should do.
I really think this. I think if Max Anderson, if the Tigers, let's say the Tigers didn't draft who they drafted, and in like 5 years ago on a prospect, he would have been top 10 on easily on our
Yeah.
our list when we first started doing this. If Max Anderson was a player that was drafted by the old regime based off his profile, he would have been a top 10. But that's I think that's a really good indication of how much Tigers have looked into pure hitters and looking at guys that can do things, because Max Anderson, I think, was a Big Ten. I think he led the Big Ten in hitting for Nebraska,
Yeah.
and all the things on paper. This is like a perfect example of, okay, this is
414 for Nebraska with
Yeah.
21 homers.
yeah. So on paper, you look at that and you go, wow, like maybe that I understand why people would want him at a higher clip or want him higher on the prospect list. But I mean, Kevin McGonagall's doing those things at his age. Cole Key, it's just, you know what I mean? Like you have to consider age, and so
Yeah, and I think it's just us being slightly conservative with we just want to see a little bit more.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
That's all.
Santana drop downs. We talked about that a little bit, but I think Santana's going to be due for a bounce back again. The power numbers were there in terms of like hard hit contact. The walks were still there, but again, just maybe between the ears or something. We don't know with that, but defensively he was fine. Madison still stays at 20. I think we had him at 27 before, so no surprise there. Blake Howell now with the Brewers. Him and Madison both were clutch down the stretch for Erie and really established the back end of the bullpen. He's still, that arm will still play up pretty well, whether he starts the season in Erie or Toledo. And Andrew Magno, I got to give a lot of props to him in a sense, because he has been used all over the system, and there's a potential major league reliever arm in there. I think the two curveballs he throws in there, but the fastball, he did a good job of locating, and the fact that I think the Tigers still think highly of him. He was left on the Rule 5 draft, and I'm surprised no one even picked him in the minor league side of things either.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things. With Santana, we talk about Ryan Garco told us, it's just about him getting on plane earlier. His launch angle is too steep. His bat path is too steep, so he's hitting way too many fly balls, too many foul balls, too many pop ups. That's something that's, I think, fixable. We talked about the power is there, that the pitch recognition is there. So, but he didn't perform, so we dropped him down. And then we talk about Madison and Magno. We can kind of combine them because, it's always a little bit iffy to have pure relievers on a prospect list. Just, which is weird. It's always the way it's been, right? Like, you usually have starting pitchers and then they convert to relief and they become help relievers in the pro ball. But Madison and Magno are both really interesting. They both have kind of an over the top arm angle, presents an interesting look. And then they have three pitches that kind of blend together and work well with one another. So something that JJ Cooper talked about is, Madison is more mid to upper 90s with a breaking ball and a changeup that work well. And Magno, like you said, he's more like 92, 94, but we've seen him touch 96, which is not bad from a lefty. And then he has that high spin curve and a good slider. So with Magno, it's a little bit more of throwing more strikes. He did a pretty good job of this year. But I think he's always going to be a little bit loose in the zone. So we're just kind of projecting there. Hopefully, with another year, he can tighten that up. And then, that the stuff is there to be a valuable member of a big league bullpen. I don't know if other teams, or including the Tigers, are convinced he can throw enough strikes to do it.
And the one person that I think that stands out about Magno too is that when I've noticed this too, he was one of the few times where you could see him as a closer too sometimes, and they used him down the stretch that way. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. He pitched a lot of leverage innings. He started in Toledo, I think, and then moved back down to Erie. Try not to hold that against them, right? Sometimes they just want you where they want you and need you where they need you. But yeah, he's a guy that certainly Gabe Alvarez trusted to close games. That's valuable, I think. If you've got that stuff and you've got the experience, that could come in handy in the big leagues too.
And then as far as 29 goes, Chris Myers and Luke Gold. Myers, Toledo, was MAC Player of the Year, could always hit. And he was a guy who could hit with power too. I mean, just some of the towering home runs. But he had 2 monster shots in the championship series, and he was a difference maker. Again, we talked about this a little earlier about his ability to go out. He went out in the outfield, learned left, but defensively, as Alvarez mentioned, he was one of the better defenders at first base. Showed really good range. Struggled a little bit when he got to Erie, but then picked it up pretty well. And then Luke Gold. I mean, out of all, if you would have told me that Luke Gold would have been in our top 30, I would have just been like, who? Not to sound crass or anything like that, but I was really the more I saw Luke Gold, the more it just seemed like it. I mean, the fact he can hit with power, he had an ISO over 200 at high A in the Midwest League. That's pretty hard to do considering the level of competition he's facing.
And he was one that just he struggled in his pro debut the previous year in Lakeland, hit 200, and it was 19 games, and then he returned to Lakeland this year, and again it was a bit of a struggle for him for the first month or two, but then he really turned it on, and that, as you said, that continued up into West Michigan. And I don't know if he made a swing change or something like that, but it's kind of striking. His swing is a little bit reminiscent of Kerry Carpenter's. It's kind of that, like, he like stands on his back foot and has his front leg hover for a little while, and then he launches. And he's right-handed, obviously, and not lefty like Kerry Carpenter, but it really worked for him. And I'm just looking, yeah. So he had 188 in April, and then 208 in August with 1 home run those first 2 months, and then 354 in June with 2 homers, 250 in July with 3 homers, and 277 with 4 homers in August. So yeah, he's a guy that just continued to get better, and he became kind of a key cog in that West Michigan lineup down the stretch. It's one of the few guys you could count on to hit for power. And yeah, he's an adequate second baseman again, and it's just again, it's another potential solid bat in the org. He's not higher because we don't know. It's just taking him a little bit longer for a college guy, but yeah, I don't know. We wanted to reward him there, I think, for his improvements last year.
And he's only 23. I mean, in terms of like college guys, I mean, this is
Yeah.
he just turned 23, so he's kind of on the younger side of things.
Same
But
class as Young and Peyton Graham and those guys.
props to the Tigers Northeastern scouts because they continue to do work because this guy went to Boston College. He's from the New York area, and we've seen Jason Foley. We've seen Tyler Matson, I believe, is from that area, isn't he?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So they
And
continue
Malcherry. Lots of guys.
Yeah, and they're starting to scout that area very well, and so we're starting to see some benefits of that. And Luke Gold, yes, mind you, he went to Boston College, but still, that whole area up there, the Tigers are doing a very good job of. You don't think of a typical. I think a typical Tiger, or excuse me, a typical fan may not think of the Northeast or like Midwest. I would say this: I don't think of that area in terms of like baseball, all this talent coming out of there. But I was blown away the more I read about it. I mean, Carl Yastrzemski grew up in Massachusetts, so I can never say the name right. But anyway,
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, again, top 30 snap cutting time. So they're really sticking with us. We like I said, we went 40, 55 deep with our lists. There are plenty of guys that could justify putting on the top 30. This is just our list right now. And I guarantee you there will be a handful of new names on the list whenever we update it, which could be in May, could be in June, could be after the draft. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty strong system now. It's a nice top 4, top 5 for sure, and then I think solid depth up into the when you get through the teens and into the 20s. So it's nice to have, and we'll see how much of these are how many of these prospects filter into the big leagues this year. It could be 6 to 10 even, right? There could be a lot of help coming from the farm this year.
yeah, definitely, and we could see Jackson Jobe at some point in a Tiger uniform.
Yeah.
crazier things have happened. I think he's that good. So please subscribe if you haven't subscribed to our channel. Please subscribe to our channel, Tiger, our YouTube channel, or the Motor City Metrics one. And just type those in; it'll find it for you. And please, again, we're going to be doing a proper GoFundMe here shortly, so we can get down the spring training in for cost for the year. So we appreciate everybody checking us out, all our content. And go to TigersMLReport.com. Check out Chris's report on Briseño. We're going to be doing a top 30 summary article as well. That's going to be coming out over the next couple days. Myself, Chris Brown, I'm Rogelio Castillo. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good afternoon or evening or whenever you're listening to this.